Okay, and tonight Rachel Smith is joining us to share some inside and outside perspectives. Just a little bit of background. If it wasn't for Rachel Smith, I I would not be where I am today. I mean, she really is the godmother of virtual facilitation. As far as I'm concerned, she invented digital scribing. So she was a longtime employee of the Grove Consultants, which is how I met her. And we've done tons of workshops together,
Mhm.
facilitating virtual collaboration, which is the Grove's virtual facilitation course. She wrote part of my book, Surviving the Horror of Online Meetings, and I'm sure that it would not have gotten the reception that it got if it wasn't for Rachel. I am hugely in Rachel's debt. And then right in the middle of everything, right at the height of her career, when her star had reached its apex, she vanished. Now she's back. Welcome back, Rachel Smith. Her first
Thank you.
time out from the dark side, and she's going to talk about what it's like to be on the outside, the inside. So, Rachel, first of all, where did you go?
Where did I go? Yeah, because I think I did a couple of talks while I was there, and I did not name the organization, so you would have had to sleuth it out on LinkedIn. But the company's pretty picky about being mentioned on social media. So I took a position at Oracle, and actually Vasuda here, who's in the audience, was one of my colleagues while I was there. So
We miss you, Rachel.
what's that?
We miss you a lot.
Did you? Oh, thank you. Thank you. And Brian, before I forget, thank you so much for that really stellar introduction. I always love appearing on things that you host because you paint me in the most flattering light. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So what we thought we would do is Rachel and I would actually do a little bit of kind of dueling perspectives. And so, just because this is Nova Scribes is in Northern Virginia, I have a background as I'm a former federal employee. I've worked for a big government contractor. I've worked for a small contractor. I've worked for myself. And so I thought that I would give a little bit of my perspective. I find myself having to do a little bit of ad hoc career coaching with a lot of people who are transitioning in and out of those. Rachel herself has just recently transitioned, so she thought that she would do the same thing. Rachel, first question that I've got for you. So you were part of the Grove for a long time, and then you went to work for Oracle. So ostensibly, you went from being a consultant to being a client. So what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, there actually was an interstitial period there where I was an independent consultant after the Grove and before Oracle. So I did that too. Um, and when I was at the Grove, I was a hourly, and not hourly, but a full-time employee. And then when I was my own consultant, I was not. I worked when there was work and, not so much when there wasn't work. And then I went back to being a full-time employee at Oracle. And it was a pretty bizarre transition to go back to that. The timing on that was really interesting because I was hired in March of 2020. And I don't know if any of you remember anything about March of 2020, but I was in the last face-to-face onboarding group at Oracle.
Hmm.
And the next week, the next group was onboarded virtually. I was in the office Monday for onboarding. I was in the office Tuesday. I was completely lost. It was my first job where I was going to be in an office in, I don't know, 20 years, because my previous 2, 3 jobs, I worked from home. And the third day that I was there, Wednesday, I left early for a doctor appointment or something. My boss texted me and said, don't come in tomorrow. We're all going to stay home for a few days because of this thing that's going around. People are getting sick. We don't know what's going on. And we never went back. So instead of being an office employee, I went right back to being an at-home employee, which actually worked out pretty well for me. The work was different. I was not hired as a graphic facilitator. I was hired as a program manager. So what I was doing was quite different. And one of the first things that I had to do was pass Oracle's Architect Associate exam, which is for people who build cloud servers, which I got to tell you, nobody in their right mind would have me build their cloud server. It would just not be a good thing. I passed the exam, but you don't want me building your cloud environment. It would just not be a good thing. So that was totally different. And I had bought a really nice set of Neuland whiteboard markers
Mhm.
because I thought I'm gonna be in the office, I'm gonna wow people with my whiteboarding, it's gonna be awesome. I don't think I ever used them. I took them straight home again, didn't use them. So I went back to digital scribing when I did scribing, but I didn't even do very much of that. So it was, the work was very different. It was a lot of meeting people. One of the hardest things to get used to in the beginning is that meetings at Oracle, and I think at a lot of the big tech places, are 30 minutes pretty much by default. If you want a meeting that's more than 30 minutes, you better have a really good reason. So I would go to these meetings and I would just be hitting my stride and the meeting would be over. Because I'm used to these, day-long engagements and half-day engagements, and you have all the time. And no, it was 30 minutes or nothing. So that was a bit of a learning curve at the start too. And it was interesting to be in the position of, if I worked with a group to help them define and solve a problem, I stuck around while it was being solved. Whereas as a consultant facilitator, you kind of drop in, you help people outline the problem and outline the solution, and then you're gone. And you're lucky if you hear what happened. You're lucky if you hear how it goes. But at Oracle, I was day by day, they're executing the solution as well, along with the people that, that had been designing it with me. So that was a pretty big change.
Did you prefer that kind of day-to-day sticking with it, being in the tactical side, or do you like more like the floating in, floating out?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are benefits to both, and I enjoy both, and both are very frustrating for different reasons. So, so it's kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, I'd say. It's really satisfying to see it unfold, and it's really satisfying to watch people grapple with problems and overcome them and be there while it happens. And so that part I very much enjoy. The frustrating part of the day-to-day is that you get up the next day and you're still working on the same problem. And then you get up the next day and you're still working on the same problem. And sometimes there's a reorg and then you start working on the same problem again from the start. And that's pretty frustrating. But it's very satisfying to make progress and see progress being made. Scoot is nodding because she knows what I'm talking about.
So if you want to chime in, by all means. So,
Yeah,
one of
please.
the things that I think one of the reasons that you hire a facilitator, visual or otherwise, is to have what I like to think of extraordinary conversations. And what I mean by that is like literally extraordinary. So if you're going to have a team that's working on its day-to-day stuff, their operational, their tactical level, you could say that you could hire a facilitator for that. More likely, you just need good meeting habits and good meeting hygiene. All right, follow a script, do outcomes agenda, roles, rules, and what have you. Did you find that you were drawing on your skill set as a facilitator once you were part of an internal team?
100%,
How so?
100%. I had so I would naturally do those things, right? The agenda, outcomes, rules, roles. I just do those at the beginning of the meeting. I do my thing where no matter what goes wrong with the virtual meeting, I'm going to be calm. And you got to remember, everybody else had been in the office for most of their careers, and now they're suddenly all online. So one of the things that I was able to do was help people have good meetings online. So that
Right.
transferred directly. I mean, that was just, I was very well positioned to help with that. I had people email me after meetings and say, can you teach me how to do what you did in that meeting? Because I've never had a meeting go that well. So these are not things that were just happening naturally in these meetings. People would get to the meeting, there'd be no agenda, they wouldn't know the people in the room, somebody would start talking, some decision gets made, but it doesn't get recorded. And then, a week later, you have the same meeting again. And here I came along and I said, this is what we're doing. This is who's in the room. This is what we're going to accomplish by the end of the time. These are the decisions we made this time. And this is what we're going to do next time. And people go away and they're like, we got so much done in that meeting. And it just really, the discipline by and large wasn't there. Some people have it, people who have a facilitator background have it, but it's definitely the exception and not the rule. So I would say, yeah, being a facilitator was extremely helpful in my role there.
Now, were you a manager? Were you in a place where you could facilitate the meetings? Because sometimes one of the things that I hear, especially if I'm teaching facilitation, is that, well, this is all well and good, but I'm not the person who's organizing the meeting. How do I facilitate from my chair, so to speak?
Yeah. I was for part of the time. So I was hired as an individual contributor, as a program manager. And then about 18 months, maybe 2 years in, I became a people manager. and I managed other program managers. As a program manager, you pretty much are the person in that chair. So your job is to find the right people who need to be in the room, make sure they get in the room, make sure they know what they're supposed to do, make sure they have the tools to do what they're supposed to do, and make sure that you've got the executive buy-in that you need to get the thing done. So, so for me, for most of the meetings that I did, I was the person running the meeting. The meetings where I wasn't, where I was a guest for whatever reason, I didn't run those meetings, and either people asked for help or they didn't, and or either I offered help or I didn't. But there were a lot of program managers, and by and large, they're good at running meetings because it's kind of what they do all the time. And then there were some other meetings where people either picked up stuff from watching me or they just ran the meeting, their own way. And an interesting thing that that I saw there that I hadn't seen as an external consultant, because again, as the external consultant, I'm there to run the meeting. But something that I saw at Oracle that I hadn't seen before was sort of substituting rank for facilitation, and not in a bad way. And that's not, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It works quite well sometimes, but a vice president can call a meeting and things get done and people are orderly, and it may or may not end on time, but that's another story. But because that person has the authority in the room, they can do a lot of things that a facilitator would otherwise do. They just do them very differently, but the outcome is similar.
Did you ever find yourself, being in that ongoing internal managerial role? Were there any tools that you pulled in from your practice as a visual practitioner? I'm thinking about something like, for example, a roadmap or something.
Oh yeah,
you're smiling. Okay, which
yeah.
ones did you pull in?
So the reason I was smiling was because I was thinking about software tools.
Okay.
Which I'll talk about in a second. But I used the graphic guides PowerPoint deck. I use that a lot. So the 5 bold steps, the roadmap, the mandala vision, a lot of the grid structures, those things. Early on, the tools got a lot better during COVID, as I'm sure was true pretty much everywhere. But early on, I wanted to use the tools I was familiar with, like Mural, and I can't even remember the names of some of them now because I wasn't able to use them. But what's the drag and drop cardboard, the Kanban board?
Padlet, maybe?
No,
Nope.
it's older than that.
Well, let's see.
It's gone. But anyway, there was a drag and drop Kanban board app, and I couldn't
Era, Confluence, we could go on. Yeah.
Yeah, we could use Confluence.
Okay.
We were not allowed in the division I was in. We were not allowed to use Jira. The division I was hired into used Jira, but then I was moved to another one and they weren't allowed to use Jira. Trello.
Trello, yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, Trello. We couldn't use Trello, I tried so hard to get Oracle to license Mural, and I just couldn't get it done. Just couldn't get it done. And 3 or 4 other people also tried, and we all got together and tried to get it done together, and it just couldn't happen. And there are just some restrictions that you simply can't overcome, which is another thing that was different, because as an independent consultant, I get to pick my tools.
Right.
But as an Oracle employee, I kind of use the tools that that are allowed. So I ended up, I wanted to use Mural. There was nothing that was suitable that was authorized, and this was before Zoom had released their whiteboards. So what I did is I created, have I frozen? Am I back now?
No, we can
I
still
think I
hear you.
froze.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm in a
We
place
can
where
hear
the
you
internet's
fine.
terrible. Yeah. So I created my mural board, quote unquote mural board, out of a tool called draw.io, which is a diagramming tool. Oh, now I'm frozen.
Yeah, but you're coming back in and out. I'm going to stop your video for a second, okay?
Yep.
Okay, Rachel,
Okay,
it's
I
more
can hear
important that we
again.
hear you, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally cool. Um, You all saw me anyway, so you know I'm actually sitting here, so that's cool.
Mhm.
So I recreated this mural board with a tool called draw.io, which is a diagramming tool. And um, it was an incredible amount of work to make what I wanted to. I mean, it's something that Mural just does. And I had to basically kludge it together with this other completely unsuitable tool. But it changed a very high profile, important meeting that occurred every week. It completely changed how that meeting went. And it was absolutely worth doing. But that was one of the hardest things for me to get used to, was not being able to just pull in whatever tools I wanted.
Yeah. As long as you're on that, one of I mean, one of the reasons that I've resisted the occasional job offer to go work for one of those big firms is just the amount of administrivia and bureaucracy and just like
Mhm.
the, having to fill out timesheets and things. It's just like not my, yeah,
Yeah,
not my
it's
tempo.
it's kind of like so you're the way I looked at it is I was trading a certain amount of my time and personal preference for my paycheck.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and so if they said these are the three things you have to do to get your paycheck, then I said, okay,
Yeah.
I'm making that exchange. I'm choosing to make that exchange. But um it's frustrating. It can be frustrating. It can definitely be frustrating.
Was there anything, not Oracle specifically, but is there anything that, would be worth remembering when it comes to working inside a large firm that you have to do that you don't necessarily have to do when you're part of a small firm or an independent?
I'm thinking. Um, Nothing's coming to mind. And I think it would be very dependent on where you were working. So I didn't have to do time cards
Hmm.
at Oracle. I did have to do them at Grove, and I didn't like them. But I didn't have to do them at Oracle.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
you know, and and so I think it just depends on what they require, where you work, and what your personal preferences are.
Yeah, and I imagine, like, as you were saying, you joined right at the beginning of the pandemic, so you had that whole thing going on.
Yeah,
I mean, in a lot of ways, the right person in the right place at the right time to help them out,
yeah.
uh, helping them work really, to facilitate virtual collaboration. You mentioned that a few folks had asked you to show them how you actually do what you do. How much training did you end up doing for the folks over there?
I did quite a bit actually. So as a manager, you do a lot of coaching of your employees. I was also asked to design and lead a design thinking course, and that
Hmm.
was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. Um, and I did there are some monthly project manager, program manager meetups. And so I did a couple of things where I taught those. Um, so I feel like I got to do a fair bit, and I could have done more if I had asked to, if I'd
Hmm.
had the time. But I'm happy with the amount that I was able to share, because I really do love teaching.
Yeah. You had talked a little bit about how if the manager's there, then we know how the decision is going to get made. I'm wondering about decision making in large organizations.
Hmm.
Going back to the thing that we borrow from Peter Senge, is it a tell, a sell, a
Yeah,
consult, or a co-create?
yeah.
My experience as being inside hierarchies is that most of the time it's a consult, which is to say, I'm the leader. I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do, but I want to hear from everybody around the table what their opinion is. Ultimately, I'll still make the decision. But it's not very co-creative. It's not like we're going to get our voting dots and
Well,
decide that way.
so it depends on what you're deciding. If you're deciding the strategy for the department or above, then yes, you're absolutely right. And a lot of times that's a tell, because or it's a very limited consult. So there's a small group of people who are consulted and everyone else is told. Um, there are there are some things, especially with program management, where a decision has been made to do something, and the program manager is told to go make it happen. But then the program manager has very wide latitude in how that happens. So, so I might, as the program manager, I might choose to do more of a consultative model to figure out how that program is going to run. And in a lot of cases, I had to do a co-create model because I had to design programs for things that I didn't understand how to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of my first jobs there was to go find a process that was being done by 5 different teams in 5 different ways and unify it into one process done one way across 5 teams. There is no way I can make those decisions. And that's as much direction as I got, right? The leader isn't going to say, I want the process to look like this, and I want you to do it this way. They're going to say, I need these 5 things to be one thing, and I need it done in the next 6 weeks. And that's my whole brief. So I've
Mm-hmm.
got to be co-creative with that because I can't be directive because I don't understand the process.
No, that makes
It's
a lot of
also
sense.
true that there were some things um, where the leader would say, I want a bunch of ideas to choose from. So, so in one case, I facilitated and co-facilitated. In another case, a large, like 75 person virtual session with the highest level engineers, where there's a lot that I can't say, so I'm trying to like I'm fumbling a little to genericize it enough that I can share it. But they came up with ideas for how to extend the services that the division offered, and those ideas were generated. They talked about it, they dot voted, and they presented the top 10 to leadership, who then chose from them. So so it really depends on where the decision is being made and what the decision is.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you. I gotta ask this question. Did you ever end up a graphic recording? And if so, did people like, were they just blown away? They're like,
It
where
went
did that
nuts.
come
It
from?
went nuts. I
Did
did.
they?
I did. I recorded the all hands. I recorded almost every all hands for our division. And I did it on the iPad. And I think the very first one that I did was the first one after we all got sent home. And it also happened to be the first one after our 1,500 person department moved from OCI to North America sales. So we moved from the part of Oracle that makes the cloud to the part of Oracle that sells the cloud. And so it was a
Mm.
huge reorg and a huge change. And our leader was using this particular all hands, basically it was a keynote, to say, this is how we got here, this is where we're going, and this is our strategy. And I recorded it on one iPad screen, and I sent it to my boss, and my boss was like, wow. And my boss sent it to the leader, who then used it in his next keynote. And it got sent out to everybody, and people went nuts. I mean, they really had not, a lot of people had never seen anything like this. The most common question I got after each of those all hands, people would reach out to me and say, what software tool did you use to develop this, and how can I do that?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And what did you say? Procreate?
I said, well, that's kind of a long answer. I said, you can use any drawing tool that you want, but you got to understand that what you're looking at is handwritten and hand drawn. And I start with a blank piece of paper, and I do this with a stylus, and they thought it was like assembling it, out of PowerPoint or something.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were then, I think, disappointed, but also kind of wowed when they found out that that was how that was done.
So there's a saying in government, which is you got to be careful about ODA, which is other duties as assigned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the problem is you do something really, really cool, and all of a sudden that's your job from now on. So did you get
Oh,
what happened? Did you get like a bunch of requests, or people were like, oh, that was cool? How
that
did
is
it
a
go?
great question. So actually, yes. So people would write, the first most common question was, what tool did you use to do that? The
Mhm.
second most common question was, would you do a slide for my presentation, team, process, whatever?
Right.
And the first time the question came in, I went to my manager and I said, look, I'm going to get a lot of these, just
Mhm.
speaking from experience. I'm going to get a lot of these requests. I can do them, I cannot do them. Help me figure this out. What's a good balance here? And my manager at the time basically told me, you know what, this is a skill that you have. It's not part of your, assigned duties. So do the ones you want to do, don't do the ones you don't want to do. I would recommend that you lean in toward doing ones that are going to impact more people or impact customers. And the interesting thing about impacting customers is Oracle is naturally very protective of its brand. And so what you show to customers, there's a limit to some of these things. So some of my drawings did make it into customer presentations, but that was the exception rather than the rule. Most of it was internal. And so I did some and I didn't do some. And, you know, when somebody said, I need 25 of these by tomorrow afternoon to show 3 people, I would say, I'm really sorry, I can't help you out. And when somebody else said, hey, we're nailing down this process. Here's the work that we've done so far. Here's the work we still have left to do. If we give you a sketch of this process, will you recreate it in the style? And it's going to be used for the whole department for the next, you know, 18 months. Sure, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. And then I updated it, you know, every 3-4 months or so until I left.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite thing about working for Oracle?
Oh, hands down, the people.
Okay.
I was astonished how I landed in a really good place, and the people I worked with were wonderful. And if you had told me, like when I was starting at the Grove, you know, or even the job that I had before the Grove, if you had told me out of your next 3 jobs, the best one is going to be Oracle, I would have laughed. I would have been like, no, I'm sorry, you got that wrong. It was amazing. I worked with fantastic, creative, smart, driven people who were really receptive to anything that would make them more effective and more impactful. By and large, it wasn't a thing where people's egos got in the way. You know, people helped each other. There was not backstabbing or undercutting. It just wonderful, wonderful people. And then close on the heels of that, the second best thing would be becoming a manager, which I enjoyed hugely, hugely. I thought I would like it. I didn't know I would love it.
What did you love about it?
I had a wonderful team, and they were they showed up and they did the work and they pitched in and they wanted to learn and they wanted to grow. And I loved coaching them. I loved watching them go from not being able to do something to mastering that thing and how proud they were of that. For myself, I loved learning how to let go of some of my OCD kind of need to oversee and do everything and just trust, you know, do kind of a huge trust fall. Um, I yeah, there's this one young woman on my team who, when she came to my team, she would not put her camera on, she would not speak up in meetings. You barely knew she was there. And by the time I left, she was leading meetings with VPs in them. And it just was watching her go through that transformation and gain that experience and gain that confidence was wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Developing others is one of the most rewarding things you can possibly do.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. And it was different from teaching and training.
Mm-hmm.
Managing is different from teaching and training. And that was very surprising and very rewarding for me.
Yeah. So having had both of the perspectives of being, for lack of a better word, a consultant, you know, somebody who's working for an organization like the Grove and going in as an outsider, what is one thing that you wish people who were external consultants or facilitators understood about the condition of the clients that they're serving?
So I can speak for specifically for Oracle and a little more generally for big tech. I'm sure it's different in a lot of different other firms. But the thing that I would want people to know is how often we reorg and how disruptive it is, and how that is completely outside our control. Because that is just, I think we went through at least a minor reorg about every 6 months while I was there, and sometimes a pretty big major reorg. And so suddenly you're reporting to different people are reporting to you. You know, even if you're a program manager, your duties are probably roughly the same. And most of the reason I got moved around when I did was because my project got moved to somebody else. And so I kind of went with it. But it is so disruptive to have to build that rapport with a new manager and a new team and get back into your stride. And a minute ago, you knew who to contact for any given question, and suddenly you don't anymore because it's all different. And it's just, it is so, so disruptive. And that would be the thing that I would most want external consultants to be aware of, is that about every 6 months, we would just be lost and we would be starting over again.
It seems like there's a big switching cost to that, there's a huge ramp up time where you've got to get used to, as you said, creating a new network, understanding, it's almost like getting a new job.
It's almost like getting a new job. The thing that saves it is that people at least in kind of the big three or four, so Oracle, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, tend to cycle through those companies. And so you end up working with people who you used to work with, and now you work with them again, and they went somewhere else, and they, bring new perspectives and things. And so you get that benefit of having known them before. So you never lose your network, really. It changes shape and the threads get longer and shorter, but you don't lose your network.
Hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Well, so if it's so disruptive, why do it? There's got to be a good business reason for it.
That is above my pay grade, my friend. That there is always a reason to do it. Often it makes something smoother or better. Sometimes the reason is not apparent to those of us who are being reorged, and you just breathe
If
in,
you had
breathe out,
to
feel it.
guess, any idea why that's going on?
So in in a company like Oracle, the most important thing is to make a profit.
Hmm.
That is the thing that you're there for. And if numbers are not going up and to the right, you will try anything to change that.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that you think is, and this is conjecture, I'm guessing, I don't sit in those meetings, I didn't sit in those meetings, but one of the things is you look at the structure of things and say, okay, we have too much resource in this department and not enough in that department, or we gave someone a 300-person org and they can take more, or they weren't ready for it, or whatever. And so
Hmm.
you make those changes in order to make your graph go up and to the right to the best of your ability, is my guess. It is not a job that I ever want. I do not covet that responsibility.
Let me turn that original question about what is it that you wish outside facilitators and consultants knew. Let's turn that on its head. What is it that you wish your clients understood, which is to say, the big tech companies, whoever it is that we go into, what is it that you wish that they understood about outside facilitators and consultants?
How important it is to have people consistently in the room.
Hmm.
And I say that with a great deal of empathy and understanding, because having been in that, on the other side, on the employee side, it is really hard to get the same 8 people in a room for more than 30 minutes or more than once a day, for multiple days. It is really, really hard. There's so many demands on your time. But that's there can be a perception that people are interchangeable, and that if you had one engineer, you could have another engineer, or if you had one program manager, you could have another program manager. And as a facilitator, I understand the importance of the consistency from meeting to meeting, and how you build trust with that group, and how you build on what you've done before. And you can't just swap people out like that. So that would be
Yeah.
my answer to that question.
Yeah. So I just have a couple more questions for you. The next one is what's next for Rachel Smith?
That is a very good question. Right now, I'm what I would call semi-retired. This is my first public speaking experience since I left Oracle. Um, I am open to doing consulting work, but I'm not chasing. Hey, look, but I'm not chasing it right now. I'm doing an awful lot of quilting and an awful lot of relaxing. It was a wonderful experience, and it was also very draining. It
Hmm.
it was just constant. The effort is constant. And so I'm enjoying being able to set my own schedule, breathe in, breathe out. You know, if I am in the middle of my workout and I want to extend it, I can do that because I don't have to be anywhere. So what's immediately next for me is more of that. I
Nice.
don't know what next year will bring. I don't know what the second half of this year will bring. I don't know. I'm curious to find out. Oh, you okay?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to switch things around, so we might
Hmm.
do a little bit of
Mhm.
drawing together, if that's
Mhm.
okay. I thought
Yeah.
what we could do is do a little bit of comparing and contrasting. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's working as an independent where you're on your own. Okay. And then there's working on a small team or maybe a small company, and I would put the Grove in that list, right?
Uh-huh.
And then there's working for a bigger organization, and you could put, Oracle there.
Mhm.
Uh, and then just because, this is Nova Scribes and we're in Northern Virginia, there's also working for the government or, with government contractors or what have you, or federal agencies and all that stuff. And what I thought we might do is just do a quick pro and con. And, if anybody on the line would like to weigh in on this one, feel free to do that. But let's start with like the pros and the cons of working as an independent. So, I mean, how about you and I just brainstorm this? And again, if anybody else wants to weigh in on what they believe the pros and cons are,
Yeah.
we can throw it up here. So, Rachel, you want to kick us off?
Um, so one of the pros for me is the variety of work
Mm-hmm.
that you get to do.
Variety. Okay.
And one of the cons would be maybe the uncertainty of of whether you're going to get enough work.
Yeah. So it's like, where's my next paycheck coming
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw into this. I love the autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole thing about, yeah, I could work out for an extra half hour or so. That works.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think for me anyway, I think that the money's pretty good. It was a little bit better for me working on my own than it has been working for a small firm or even a big organization. You may have had a different experience though.
Is the money a pro or a con for you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I put it in the wrong spot. Thanks. For me, it was a big pro.
Pro, yeah. No, I thought it was too. Although I would have to put that in the pro column for big company too.
Okay. Um,
And again, that's probably tech world kind of centered. That
yeah,
they tend to they tend to pay well.
they pay pretty well. Well, do let me know if Oracle is hiring. That's always
Yeah, if I hear.
Okay, how about like a small firm? And you work for the Grove. I worked for a company called Sensa for a while.
Mhm.
We were about I think at our height, we were about 20 people.
Yeah.
So again, I would put variety on there.
Yeah.
You sort of
Variety and
go
I
ahead.
think that the ability to have more influence over the direction of the company.
Hmm.
Uh, even if you don't have that much, I think you have more than at a larger company or certainly government or NGO.
Yeah. So it's easier to get vested in what the company's doing and what the outcome is.
Hmm.
Like we should do this strategically, or we should go after this industry, or we should not
Yeah.
hire that person.
Yeah.
Um, the cons, I mean, I'll just say this, the hard part for me was the relationships, It was
Yeah.
so small that it was almost like too much like family for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I do. I do. And but but that one kind of could span both columns because um there there are definitely pros to the strength of the relationships that you make also.
Yeah, that's true.
So
So you could put that in both.
I'd put that in both. Um, what would be a con?
Sometimes there's also a lot of uncertainty there too.
Yeah, yep. Uncertainty and
Not really a whole lot of room for advancement.
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I remember you had a couple of projects that didn't see the light of day, and I think the world is poorer for it. Some of the things that you were working on while you were over there that never came out there. Um, how about big companies? So you said the money was good.
Yeah, and for me the difference of experience, so being able to manage a team, I couldn't do that.
Mhm.
at a small place like the Grove, but being able to manage was really really a plus for me there. And also, I'm not sure how to articulate this, so maybe you can help me, but
Mhm.
being at a place where it is really clear, the bottom line is really clear. It's not, nobody's ever in doubt whether you're achieving what the company is meant to achieve or not. And it just it helps the purpose is clear, the priorities are clear. Whether you agree with it or not, it's very,
Mhm.
very clear.
Any negatives?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let's go back to the tools that I couldn't use.
Oh yeah. Okay. So tools off limits. Did you ever feel like you were, I don't know, going back to the variety that you experienced when you were an independent working for the Grove? Did you ever feel like you were maybe shoehorned into a position? It's like, well, this is your job description, and thou shalt go no further. Is
So
there any?
no, because that tends not to happen to me, but I know that some people felt that way. So that can definitely be something that employees feel.
Hmm.
Um, I'm pretty hard to shoehorn just because I have such a wide variety of things I can do.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the negatives that I would add here is there was more than once where we worked on something for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, even a year, and then there was a reorg or a change in how we were going to measure things,
Right.
and you ended up having to start over and do the same thing again,
Right.
just with the new, yep, with the new metrics or the new, and that was hard. That was,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I chose the date to leave that I did, I was going to leave anyway, but one of the reasons that I chose the date that I did was they were about to reset something I had worked on for the last 4 months, and I would have to do it again, and I just couldn't do it again.
Too much of an effort, too much emotional investment.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't even that. It was an annoying thing to have to do once. I didn't want to have to do it again.
Yeah, the other thing that I found when I was working for a large firm, it was that I kept they kept changing my boss.
Yeah, that was hard too.
You had that too?
Those
Yeah.
were hard. Yep. And it got easier though. I'll tell you what, it got easier. So it takes me a long time to develop a trust relationship with a manager.
Hmm.
And I noticed over time, I think I had, let's see, one, two, three, four, five different managers in the 3.5 years that I was there. And I did notice that over time, that length of time decreased for me to to build the trust. And I ended up giving a lot more slack, I guess, to my last couple of managers than I did to my first couple of managers.
So that was magnanimous of you. That's good.
Well, it was more pragmatic than anything else because you have so much energy and you can spend it on that or not, and it's not going to change anything if you spend it on that. So I put it
Right.
elsewhere.
I mean, I think to that point, if you were to extend this idea of reorgs, I mean that's it's the change of metrics, it's the
Yeah.
change of boss, it's also the change of focus, I think.
Hmm.
One of the things that the company that I worked for, it seemed to have a problem where it was all about one thing one quarter, then it was all about something else the next quarter, and it was just
Yeah.
hard to keep up with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you experienced something similar to that, but like the
Yeah.
focus seemed to be really transient.
The the underlying purpose remains the same,
Mhm.
but the strategy to get there changed sometimes from quarter to
Right.
quarter or half year to half year, certainly year to year. Um, and there are specific dates, when those things happen, when you just come in and you just expect, okay, somebody's going to tell me what I'm doing today that I wasn't doing last year.
Mhm.
So yeah, I did experience that too.
This is probably the hardest part for me is that, Rachel, I know how hard you work. We both work very, very hard, because we have high standards for ourselves and for other people.
Yes.
Um, One of the things that I always got frustrated with is why am I kicking my own tail so hard to make somebody else rich? It was really hard to like find some motivation.
So
It's like,
that we go back there to the compensation because I was trading a certain amount of my time and energy for a certain amount of money, and the deal
yeah,
was fair. The deal
okay,
was fair. So
yeah,
yes, I was incidentally contributing to the wealth of a person who has a ton of wealth, but I made a fair trade for what I was doing.
You know, I think I need you as a coach just to reframe things. All right, let me do a light touch on government.
Yeah, I'm
By the way,
curious.
you could extend this out to some government contractors, not all, but I think one of the things that you get when you work for government is first and foremost the benefits. The benefits are really good. The healthcare is really good. Retirement is really good. People can actually retire, reasonably well. And then it's the job security is really
Mhm.
good. It's very difficult to get fired if you're working for the government.
Mm.
I think it should be easier to fire some people who are in government, but they still seem to stick around. Now you're never going to get rich working for government.
Right.
Um, and like the bureaucracy is unbelievable. So you're talking about like how tools are not available to you. I mean,
Oh
just
yeah.
take that feeling and ratchet that up to 11. Um, it's actually pretty phenomenal. I was gonna go and long story short, I was gonna go and do a 1 day class for this one government agency. And the amount of paperwork that they sent me, I was actually curious about this. They sent me probably 30 different Adobe Acrobat forms
Wow.
to fill out. I took them all, I dumped them into the same portfolio. You know how you can do that in Acrobat just
Yeah.
to get a page count. And the
Yeah.
page count was over 350 pages of forms that I had
Oh
to fill out.
man.
And I
You
said,
know,
listen, guys, I'm sorry. I can't, I'm going to lose money if I spend 40 hours filling out all these forms to come and teach a 1 day class,
yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, you have to do that again and again.
There
Again, it can be a real grind.
there are companies that do the paperwork for other companies.
I,
That's all
I
they
need their
do,
names. I need
and
their
that's
names.
all they do.
Yeah.
But manufacturing companies, especially, my husband used to work for a manufacturing company, and they had another company that they would sell to
Mhm.
because they couldn't sell to the government agency that wanted to buy from them because they couldn't do the paperwork.
Yeah.
So this other company would do the paperwork, they'd buy the product, they'd turn around and sell it to the government, and everybody was happy.
Gosh, if you give me their names, I could use them. I'll keep them.
I'll see what I
Uh,
can do.
yeah. You know, the one thing that I think some people think gets into this one that really doesn't is politics. Because the
Mm,
truth is that if you're doing the work at the level that most of us are at, it's very rare that you'd spend a whole lot of time, interfacing with a political appointee.
oh,
It's just
interesting.
they're at such a high level
Mhm.
that most of the work that we do, it doesn't really come close to them, and you're not going to come close to them on a regular basis. And at an offsite, everybody's on their best behavior.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
so you don't really get the politics showing
Oh,
up. I
that's
have
nice.
worked with political appointees from both sides of the aisle, and when they're out there, they want to show up as a leader and as their best self, and so they're
Mm.
usually great to work with.
Oh, that's nice to
Um,
know.
yeah. So I want to open it up. Let me stop sharing my screen a little bit. I want to open it up for questions, just because we've got a little bit of time left, not a whole lot. Hopefully this was helpful to some folks. And if the way we'll do this is if you would like to, if you want to ask something of Rachel, just go ahead and go off mute. We'll see it and we'll call on you. By the way, I also noticed that well, I know that we've got Paul doing some sketchnoting for us, doing some digital scribing. No pressure doing this in front of Rachel. And I'm also seeing that Benoit, who is this year's Nova Scribe Scholar, he's going to the IFEP
Nice.
this year
Excellent.
through Nova Scribes. He looks like he was also maybe doing a little sketchnoting. And
Okay.
Benoit, if you want to show that off.
Yeah, can we see those, or are you willing to share them?
I can share. I'm not sure I'm gonna be pleased with it, but that's uh, so just basically just key point for myself and a few scribble in there. And I didn't use my sketchnoting app. I use my note app. Somehow
Nice.
my brain has two apps. One is good notes and one is concept. So when it's sketchnoting, it's concept. When it's just to be a note for myself, it's going to be good notes. So I have to work on having my brain unsplit those apps better. But now I just learned that I can do that with PowerPoint apparently because Brian is using PowerPoint in the back. So I'm going to have to investigate on that.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
that's
about
great.
as fancy as I get when it comes to the whole digital scribing thing. That's kind of how it rolls. So Paul, are you ready to show yours off?
I gotta figure out the binding for unmuting. I don't have it framed very well, but
Oh, awesome.
and I should.
Nice.
Oh, there's your
There we
quilt,
go.
Rachel. There you go.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, I might move things around a bit so that it looks better as a
Yeah,
composed image. But
that's awesome.
yeah, that's not backwards, is it? No.
No, it looks
No,
right.
it's not. It's not. I like the
No.
title. I really like your title.
Yeah, the title's really cool.
I spent a
Shadow
few
Knight.
minutes thinking about what to do with it.
Nice.
All right, cool. Well, we can open it up. Phil, I noticed you dropped into the chat. Thanks. Helpful as I incorporate OD in my communication theory and strategy communication classes. I teach a fall class on mediated organizations, how digital communication shows up in various organizations. Helpful thoughts here. Thanks. Thanks, Phil. It was nice, man.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Phil.
All right. Well, let me do this since nobody's jumping off mute right away. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Rachel, thank you so much. It's great to see you. It's nice to have you back. Hopefully a little bit.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be
Yeah.
back.
That's awesome. Thanks everybody. Next time my place, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording.